So my name is Ramona Gönzel, and I'm an associate professor in Romanian language at UCL in London at the School of Slavonic and European Studies, and the convener of this ProLang research group. And I'm also the academic coordinator for the online language evening class program that we run at UCL. ProLang stands for Policy Research and Outreach in the field of language-based area studies, with particular focus on languages of the Central Eastern, Southeastern Europe, the Baltic region, and Russia, that we cover through our degrees and evening classes. We offer a total of 18 languages from the region. Today's event presents and discusses Carlos' latest book, Ladino on the Internet, which constitutes the first critical and systematic account written in English on the online revitalisation of Ladino. This book conclusively demonstrates that nowadays the global Ladino-speaking community connects first and foremost online, and that is so true, which calls for a full comprehensive examination of the web-based development of the Sephardic diaspora as a qualitatively different stage, termed Sepharad 4 in this book. This monograph will appeal to scholars and postgraduate students seeking to familiarize themselves with the use of technological tools to further the revitalization of endangered languages such as Ladino. Carlos Yebra López, I guess everyone knows him, but he's an assistant professor in Spanish linguistics at California State University in Fullerton. He has worked as a Ladino instructor at the Oxford School of Rare Jewish Languages and as a CEO of Ladino 21 Community Interest Company, a public outreach initiative and digital archive devoted to grassroots documentation of Ladino. Just checking that with more people waiting. No, it's fine. Carlos was also a UKRI postdoctoral research fellow on Ladino at UCL, where we met, and contributed to our popular team-taught course, Languages in Contact Along the Danube, where students from across UCL attend. He's the author of several recent journal articles, such as the digital deterritorialization of Ladino in the 21st century, and decolonizing Spanish, Ladino, and Chavacano as sites of global Hispanophonia, as well as a simplified guide to reading and writing Ladino in Russian Solitrero, which was published last year. Carlos, if you're okay with this presentation, I'll pass the floor to you. Wonderful.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Ramona, for organizing this event, for the generous presentation. It's amazing to be back, albeit in online fashion. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I don't want to make of this event a unidirectional one. So please feel free to ask, post questions in the chat. Then I will make sure to give you enough time to post questions live. And as I said, in the meantime, if you have any query, just write them in the chat, please. Now, please allow me to share the screen to begin the presentation. And so as you can see, the object of this presentation is the book Ladino on the Internet, Sepharad 4, which was just published in last December, and it's available open access for free for everybody to download it for exactly $0. And so I encourage you to do all of that. And you can read every chapter from the introduction to all the chapters and then the conclusion for free, open access. Now, this is the structure of the book, which divides it into the 3 stages of the web, 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. I will break this down later on. Now, this project, as Ramona well stated, started at the UCL Hebrew and Jewish Studies Department in collaboration with others, right? SEES, etc. And I had the chance of bouncing off the ideas concerning Ladino with similar revitalization projects concerning other Jewish languages, notably Yiddish and Hebrew. So I also touch upon Yiddish in particular in this book. In each chapter, at the end of it, there is a comparison with similar initiatives that have been carried out apropos Yiddish. Now, the framework is revivalistics, which was adopted by Gilad Zuckerman, apropos the reclamation of Hebrew, the revitalization of Ladino, and the reinvigoration of Yiddish. The difference being that the reclamation affects languages that stopped being used, like Hebrew, and then were reclaimed. Then the revitalization is about languages that have a very weak intergenerational transmission, such as Ladino. And reinvigoration affects those languages that still have a somewhat strong intergenerational transmission, i.e. Yiddish. That's the difference, right? But that is all of these three categories, reclamation, revitalization, reinvigoration, fall under the umbrella of revivalistics. So that is the theoretical framework I use, which is not to say that I just apply it to the book. I also problematize some of the assumptions of revivalistics, right? So it's a genuine dialogue between that framework and the case study of Ladino. Now, why is it called Sepharad 4 in the subtitle? This is important to understand. Max Weinreich, in his book, talks about Ashkenaz as the place of Ashkenazi diaspora, right, Yiddish speaking, and establishes a parallel or draws a parallel with Sepharad as the place of the Sephardic diaspora, and says Sepharad as a social diaspora can be divided into three stages. He says Sepharad 1, 2, and 3. Sepharad 1 has to do with the Jews of the Iberian Peninsula prior to the expulsion. At that point, we don't really have Ladino as a separate language, but rather certain terms or pronunciations, say, for instance, Dio as opposed to Dios. But we don't have a fully fledged vernacular. We have Ladino as a calque, as a word-by-word translation of the Hebrew Bible in 13th century Iberian Peninsula for liturgical purposes, but we don't have Ladino as a language that is spoken in the streets and is markedly different from Ibero-Romance languages of that time. After the expulsions around 1492, we have the progressive crystallization of Ladino as a vernacular, as a spoken language around the Mediterranean basin, indicated here through the red arrow. This is the area what is nowadays Turkey, what is nowadays Greece, Italy, etc., where Ladino crystallized over a century as the spoken vernacular, right? And it crystallized into two dialects, Judesmo in the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea, and then Haketia in the north of Morocco, mostly, right? Judesmo and Haketia. So when we say Ladino nowadays, and in this book in particular as well, we actually mean Judesmo. We just mean the Eastern Mediterranean vernacular, as opposed to Haketia or the Western vernacular of the north of Morocco, okay? So for the purpose of this presentation, Judesmo equals Ladino, even though strictly speaking, it's just one vernacular dialect. Sepharad 3 then is the global diaspora of Ladino, which is achieved around the 1950s with the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, pogroms in Turkey, for instance, and also the independence of Morocco in 1956. All of these events lead to a global diaspora, notably Sephardic migration to the Americas. Right? So we move away from a Mediterranean system to a world system. Those are the three stages that Max Weinreich already distinguished in his work. And in this book, I argue that the nature of Ladino in the 21st century, in 2025, is such that it requires us to conceptualize its development and that of the Sephardic diaspora as a newly distinguished stage, which I call Sepharad 4, which is influenced by the internet, not just as a new container for all realities, but as an ensemble of affordances that radically changes the way Ladino is written, spoken, etc. Hence justifying a new form of communicating across the Sephardic diaspora, which we call Sepharad 4, which is more that the world connecting in a different fashion, leading to different outcomes. That is Sepharad 4, right? And so the book just dissects the evolution of Ladino in Sepharad 4 on the internet. Right. Masal says, my family speaks Haketia, mashallah. We know that, as Ramona said, we have Ladino 21 as a digital archive where we document Ladino in the 21st century. So if your family speaks Haketia, get in touch with me. We might be able to upload an interview to Ladino 21 and showcase that testimony, which is extremely valuable because as endangered as Judesmo is, Haketia is much more endangered. But that's a topic for another day, maybe for the Q&A. Now, the reflection about Ladino on the internet is very scarce. Typically, Ladino on the internet has been treated as a footnote or an appendix to Ladino off the internet. As in, hey, there's this history of Ladino, and yeah, there's some Facebook groups. This is cute, but it's not something that merits a qualitatively different type of attention, which I hardly disagree with in this book, right? The first reflection on the importance of Ladino on the internet is due to Michelle Held in her article Digital Homeland, or Patria Digitala in Ladino, if you want to translate it like that, where she argues that there are communities being created on the internet that serve as an ersatz, meaning a lesser replacement of offline communities. This means that as there are less and less physical communities, neighborhoods where people interact only in Ladino, that creates the need to replace that void with online communities, right? Communities that only can be united through the internet, given that they're no longer in the same country or in the same neighborhood, particularly in an Aliyah scenario, right? Where a lot of Jews that were born and raised in Turkey have migrated to Israel. So they're separated from their friends and from their families, for instance, etc. So how do they connect on a daily basis? Has to be the internet, right? And that's why Michael Held calls it homeland with a hyphen. A hyphen is not a typo. It's meant to highlight the contingent relationship between the home and the land. This means that you can share a sense of home, a sense of belonging to the same community without being in the same land, without being in the same territory. You can be in Israel, you can be in LA, you can be in Spain and belong to the same home, the Ladino-speaking home, without sharing the land. Right? Hence the homeland. So that was great for 2010 because there was only Ladino Comunidad, which is an email list where people interact exclusively in Ladino. That was the only digital homeland back then. However, a decade later in 2021, there were already all the social media platforms, right? Already Facebook groups, the TikTok accounts, the Instagram accounts, etc. So the digital archives, apps like Duolingo, etc. So as more and more online communities that communicate exclusively or mostly in Ladino proliferated, that created for me the need to make a distinction between mere online communities and actual digital homelands. So not every online community, not every Facebook group that communicates a little bit in Ladino is an actual digital homeland, is an actual platform that makes people feel as though they belong to the same nation by virtue of Ladino, right? So in addition to being a mere virtual community, a digital homeland has to fulfill a number of criteria, right? And those were four, in my opinion. The use of Ladino. If you talk about Ladino, but you don't talk in Ladino, it's hard to crystallize into a digital homeland apropos Ladino. Second, Sephardic voice when it comes to making decisions. Are you making decisions on behalf of Sephardim or letting Sephardim themselves make those decisions? Third, the interaction. Are you just putting your message out there? Or are you actually establishing a dialogue with people? Can people interact with that content? Is that a one-to-many or a many-to-many type of interaction, right? It has to be many-to-many to foster that community sense. And finally, signatures with name, surname, which is alcunia in Ladino, and place. So there are certain surnames and certain places that are very emblematic of the Sephardic diaspora, say Aguado, Amado, Istanbul, Izmir, Jerusalem, etc. So anytime people read those names, they come to sense a feel of belongingness to that nation, which is why it's important for those names to be out there. Yeah. Okay. So that's how we come to my book, which is the first systematic and comprehensive account of Ladino on the internet since Ladino Comunitas is 1999 until nowadays, right? Until nowadays. Okay. So as I said, divided into three parts: Web 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. So let's break it down. The Web 1.0 is the mostly read part of the web. What does that mean? It means that back in the day, the oldest people here in the room will remember, back in the day, at the beginning of the internet, there were just websites, right? And if you wanted to interact or respond to the content, you had to create your own website. This is why the Web 1.0 or 1.0 is the mostly read website, right? And in that context, we didn't have the possibility of making comments on newspapers or engaging on Facebook. This was all pre-social media. And in that context, the best way to stay in touch with other people were emails. So an email list, a lista de mail electrónico, was the best you could do in terms of staying in touch with other people prior to social media. And that's precisely what happened in the case of Ladino. Ladino Comunidad was created in 1999. There are other examples of other email lists like the Ladino Cultural Forum, Sepharad Muestro, but they were nowhere near as successful as Ladino Comunidad. So Ladino Comunidad started with this congress in Israel, where Moshe Shaul, Zichrono Livracha, suggested the creation of an email list where only Ladino written in the Latin script, according to the Aki Yerushalayim orthography, was to be used. So he was the mastermind of that idea. However, who implemented the idea? Rachel Bornik did. Rachel Bornik went ahead and founded that email list, contacted 5 or 6 friends, and then word of mouth wise, the news were spread and more people joined the list until Ladino Comunidad came to be what is nowadays, which is a very successful, active, interactive email list with thousands of members that write every day exclusively in Ladino in the Latin script, according to the Aki Yerushalayim orthography. So the first chapter of the book is devoted to just that, Ladino Comunidad. Ladino Comunidad has been discussed a number of times in previous journal articles, but it has never been discussed with the depth that is discussed in the first chapter of this book, which I encourage you to read. Now, I praise Ladino Comunidad because it's not only a very successful platform, it was the first one, it was the pioneering one. So it inspired many other projects, amongst which my own work on Ladino 21, right? It showed that it is possible to preserve Ladino in the 21st century on the internet and make it grow from there. So it's a commendable effort, and Rachel Bornik and all the moderators that work there, Guler Orgun, Aldo Sevi, Moshe Gormes, Yehuda Hatzvi, etc., do a terrific job. And I learned Ladino partly because of their effort and generosity. However, there are also disadvantages or blind spots to this effort, right? The most concerning one, in my opinion, is prescriptivism. We make sure that everybody writes in the same way, in the same script, according to the same orthography. That's great for uniformity purposes, right? Homogenization purposes. However, there's a complexity, depth, and diversity of Ladino legs that are lost in that process. We lose the possibility of writing Ladino in Hebrew scripts, which many have argued and continue to argue are inherent to Ladino, so that if Ladino is no longer written in Hebrew scripts, is it Ladino anymore? Is the language really alive anymore? So that's very important, right? The fact that it's not written in Rashi or not written in Solitreo sacrifices a great deal of complexity in the Ladino legs. Also, there are Bulgarian Cyrillic, Serbian Cyrillic, many other scripts, right, to write Ladino historically. So those are lost, mostly. And you also have geolects, right? What is the geolect utilized in Ladino Comunidad is the Istanbul geolect, right, as opposed to Greek geolects or other ones. So that there's also complexity lost there, etc. So yes, prescriptivist success at the expense of lect complexity. That will be the trade-off. I'm not saying it's not a necessary trade-off. I'm saying there are pros and cons, right? Okay, so that's Web 1.0. And now we start the most original part of the book, which is the systematic account of platforms that had never been systematically discussed from a critical perspective before in the academic literature. So that's the Web 2.0. This is the social media era, which began in 2005 technically, but it didn't become massive or viral until the 2010s. Yes, Facebook started in 2004, but it didn't really reach critical mass adoption until the 2010s, right? That's when it really started to flourish. And so this Web 2.0 has very different affordances. There's a lot of different things that you can do on the Web 2.0 that you couldn't on the web 1.0. It's more participative. People can interact in real time. You don't have to wait for an email to arrive and then you write and the second email is moderated and arrives 3 days later. Now you can participate live. At the very moment you see the message, you reply and it's there. What we're doing now on Zoom, that's Web 2.0. It's multi-semiotic and it's multimodal. What does that mean? That is, multi-semiotic means that it allows for vernacularity and post-vernacularity. Let me explain what this means. Vernacular and post-vernacular, yeah? So Jeffrey Chandler, a linguist, Yiddish linguist, in his work Yiddishland, distinguishes between vernacular and post-vernacular. And he says, the vernacular use of a language is the everyday use, fluent use of it to speak about any and every topic, just like I'm doing right now in English, right? The post-vernacular takes place whenever people only remember spare words, proverbs, parts of a song in that language. And so what's happening nowadays is that Ladino is gradually decreasing its vernacularity, and less people speak the language fluently, and more people only remember some words, some proverbs, some songs. So we are witnessing a post-vernacularization of Ladino, right? In particular with Haketia, which is almost complete. Nobody speaks Haketia fluently nowadays, almost nobody. And Judaism is getting there, right? So the Web 2.0 allows for vernacular and post-vernacular instances, allows for fully fledged conversations and interviews in Ladino, and then just songs or proverbs or videos where you hear one word in Ladino and the rest of the conversation is in English, right? So it allows for both modes. Whereas in Ladino Comunidad, because everything is in Ladino, there's only the vernacular mode. There's no post-vernacularity. There's no spare words here and there. It's just vernacular. So the Web 2.0, in contradistinction with the 1.0, is vernacular and post-vernacular. It's multi-semiotic. And then multimodal means that you can consume content that is not just text, as in an email, but is also audiovisual, which is the preferred content on the internet by far nowadays, right? So you can watch a video, which allows you to hear how the speaker sounds, to look at the way they look, see how old they are, see how young they are, see where they are located, what the surroundings look like. That's the multimodal aspect of it, right? And so what are these specific platforms? Well, we have Ladino21, which is a digital archive. And we also have pedagogical resources, ladino21.org. And we have digital archives. So the digital archives started in 2011 with the creation of the Autoridad Nacional de Ladinos Digital Archive. The beauty of it is that it contains a lot of videos, 133. It has been inactive for a while now, so I'm not expecting more videos, but who knows? Curated by Matan Stein. Shout outs to Matan from here. And the beauty of it is that it has more than 100 videos. The blind spots or limitations of it is that all of those videos are recorded in Israel. So it's not really a depiction of Ladino globally, but Ladino in Israel. You can watch all the videos for free on YouTube. Just type Autoridad Nacional del Ladino. Second one is Sepharad or Sepharad. Has a lot of videos in Spanish, but some of them are also in Ladino, including all the Encontros del Had, which is a weekly meeting that takes place exclusively in Ladino. Encontros del Had. Again, just go to YouTube, type Encontros del Had, more than 200 programs exclusively in Ladino. Then you have Ladino21, right? Now we have more than 350 videos. This screenshot was taken a while ago, right? All over the world, not only on Zoom, as in Encontros del Had, which are all in Zoom, but also in person. We have done fieldwork in person in Brazil, in Argentina, in the United States, in France, in Morocco, and all of that is available for free. Just type Ladino21 on YouTube. You have all of them exclusively in Ladino in the 21st century. Then we have digital archives that are not exclusive of Ladino, that are not devoted exclusively to Ladino, but that include collections of Ladino, include 1 or 2 videos in Ladino. That's the case of Wikitones, which features 2 videos in Ladino, but it's not about Ladino per se. Same thing with the vanishing languages and cultural heritage, which is devoted to endangered languages, but as part of that effort includes a collection of Judeo-Spanish videos, very well curated, high quality one with subtitles. So I highly recommend it, again, for free on YouTube. That collection is Judeo-Spanish in Istanbul. And then finally, the Endangered Language Alliance. Again, it's about endangered languages in general, not just Ladino, but as part of that effort, it includes Ladino, and it has a very well curated, high quality collection about Ladino in New York City. Okay, in New York City, exclusively. So those are the digital archives. Advantages of the digital archives. Well, they show you a much more multifaceted aspect of Ladino. You get to hear geolects, New York, Istanbul, Morocco, France, Spain, Brazil, all over the world. You get to see the faces of those speakers. You get to see the gestures they make. It's much more multimodal. It's much more inclusive of geolects, of sociolects, of genderlects, and it's less prescriptive. I don't know how other digital archives proceeded, but in Ladino 21, we don't tell people how they should speak. We don't edit what they say. We just portray how they speak. And this means that we showcase that sometimes they forgot a word, sometimes they quote unquote make a mistake, etc. Because that is the nature of speaking Ladino in the 21st century. That is a realistic portrayal of Ladino, right? If we were to edit everything and make it look perfect and super smooth and no mistakes ever, that wouldn't be a realistic portrayal. That would be a performance. And there's a time and place for performances, not when it comes to documenting the language. Documenting the language is about bearing witness to how the language is spoken de facto, as opposed to how it should be spoken from a prescriptive perspective. Then we have WhatsApp groups. We have the WhatsApp group Estamos WhatsAppeando, created by Albert Israel, who every day sends a post on WhatsApp with an image, with a message in Ladino that you can see here. Desmazalado, le está viniendo pescado. ¿Hay quien le quiere ayudar? Meaning, poor him, he is suffering. Is there anybody who wants to help him? And then the message is translated into Hebrew. This is not Ladino in Hebrew scripts. This is actually Hebrew in Hebrew script. In Merubá, and then he, Albert, records the message in Ladino with his own voice, right? So you can hear his voice, and he sounds like something like this. Desmazalado, le está viniendo pescado. ¿Hay quien le quiere ayudar? So now you not only have the image and the text, but also the audio. Again, the multimodality of Web 2.0. What is the problem with this WhatsApp group? The direction of communication. It's just one to many. You get the post, but you cannot reply or interact or ask questions. So it's very hard to create a digital homeland with that mode of communication. But nonetheless useful, and again, for free. You just send a message, get in the group, every day you will receive content, yeah? Then you have Los Ladinadores, which is arguably Ladino Comunitas update into the Web 2.0, right? So this is curated by my friend and colleague, Aldo Sevi, and it has a very similar structure to Ladino Comunidad. It has the affordances of Web 2.0, that you can communicate, that you can exchange messages in real time, etc. But the premise is the same. The fundamental premise is this group is to revitalize Judeo-Spanish or Ladino in the Latin script according to the Aquí Jerusalem orthography. So again, it has the pros of prescriptive, successful revitalization and the cons of sacrificing a lot of lectal variety in that process. Different scripts, different geolects, etc. So as you can see here in the description on the right side of the screen, este grupo es para partagear contenidos en judeo-español. No aceptamos publicaciones en otras lenguas. So this group is to share, partager, to share contents in Judeo-Spanish. We do not accept publications in other languages, right? So again, creating that safe space where only Ladino is spoken. This is what Ferguson and Fishman and other linguists called functional differentiation. Functional differentiation, which has pros and cons. Differentiation, yeah? Okay. So, widely successful platform, probably nowadays the most successful platform of Ladino on the internet, Los Ladinadores. Again, for free. If you have a Facebook account, Just look for Los Latinadores, add, and that's it. Right? It's moderated also, so Aldo Sebi will give you feedback on your Ladino. Very generous and pesgado and hard work, the one that Aldo does. So congrats to him. Then there are apps to learn the language, you know. In the age of Duolingo, it was inevitable. I did contact Duolingo back in the day to suggest we create a Ladino course. They told me, yeah, it's in the incubator. We'll let you know when it's ready. I waited for 1 day, 2 days, 3 weeks, 4 months, and I'm still waiting as we speak. However, after 3 months, I kind of lost patience. So I contacted UTalk, which is very similar to Duolingo, but it focuses on endangered languages. It's called UTalk. You will see it in the next slide, but I'll write the name here. Again, very similar to Duolingo, but devoted to endangered languages for the most part. So you can see Shanghainese, Welsh, Isle of Manx languages, a lot of Quechua, a lot of indigenous languages as well. And the beauty of UTalk vis-a-vis Duolingo is that on Duolingo, when you want to learn a language, you have to create pairs of courses. For instance, Ladino English, Ladino German, Ladino French, and each time you have to create a new course. However, on UTalk, there is a master corpus, which means anytime you have a language on the platform, it gets automatically translated to any other language on the platform. And there are more than 150 languages, including all the relevant languages of the Sephardic diaspora: Hebrew, French, Turkish, Spanish. So you can learn directly Ladino from those languages without needing to speak any word of English. You can learn Ladino from Turkish, you can learn Ladino from Israel, which is extremely useful for a language whose primary demographic is 60+ years old. So that's incredibly useful. UTalk is not for free. You do have some part of the course that is for free, but you have to, if you want to take the full course, you have to pay around $20 per year, which is a very competitive price, I would say, but that is your decision. The app is called UTalk. And so myself and my colleague Alejandro Acero, shout outs to Alejandro, translated the main corpus, which was then edited, post-edited, right, by Rachel Bornik and Benny Aguado, both of whom are L1 speakers of Ladino, and then recorded with their own voices. So the voices you will hear on the app are Rachel and Benny Aguado's voices, again, placing decision-making powers in the hands of Sephardic. Then there's the Zoom boom. Hello, we're talking via Zoom, right? So this is testimony of the importance of Zoom when it comes to revitalizing languages. And Zoom was even more important in the case of Ladino than it was in the case of Yiddish. Why? Because Yiddish communities do not rely so much on the internet. Some of them oppose actively the use of internet. And because Yiddish was already relevant on the internet before the Zoom boom. However, in Ladino, this was a turning point. This was a decisive turning point, probably the most important development since the creation of social media, because it turned a necessity into a virtue. What was the necessity? A pandemic that affected primarily the demographic of most Ladino speakers, 60+ years old. So they were stuck at home without the ability to communicate with each other in person. So they resorted to the internet. And out of that necessity, a virtue was created, meaning platforms on the internet that allow people to communicate in Ladino. And what are those? First of all, the classes at Oxford, right? Taught initially by Ililbaum, who's here present. Shout outs to Professor Ililbaum and myself. We managed to have many more students than any physical class has ever achieved for obvious reasons. First, because it's for free to students, which means that they don't have to pay a single penny. And second, because Oxford University, right? So you have the prestige and the price, or the absence thereof, to make it worth for a lot of people worldwide. So there were years where we had more than 300 applicants. It has never been achieved ever in the history of Ladino classes in physical spaces, right? At least not in the 20th and 21st century. Then we also have the digitalization of resources that existed only on paper. For instance, El Amanecer, which is the only newspaper entirely published in Ladino in the world. Back in the day, it was very complicated to subscribe to this newspaper, because you have to subscribe and then receive the newspaper at home. And then if you moved, and I move all the time, every 3 months, then you have to update your details. And then Karen, the editor-in-chief, has to contact somebody else to then send you the physical copy of the newspaper, which then is lost, and it's a mess. However, now with the digital subscription, it's as easy as go on the internet, just pay just $10 per year or something equivalent, and they have access to new issues and all the previous issues since it was created. So that's a lot of issues. And it makes it so inexpensive that even publications such as Aquí Jerusalem, which is the only magazine, not newspaper, magazine, entirely published in Ladino in the world, even publications like Aquí Jerusalem that has ceased to be published because of lack of funding and lack of subscriptors, now, thanks to the digitalization, we're able to get back in business and be published everywhere now for free on the internet. You just type Aquí Jerusalem, you can get access to all the issues of Aquí Jerusalem for free. Highly curated. Aldo Sev is the editor-in-chief, the same person who manages Los Ladinadores, and is a moderator of Ladino Comunidad. So again, highly commendable initiative. I encourage you strongly to read Aquí Jerusalem and El Amanecer. El Amanecer, you have to pay a subscription. Aquí Jerusalem, entirely for free. And we are approaching the end, just 5 more minutes, and then I'll let you ask any questions, which is what we came for. There was also the Sephardic Digital Academy, which has now dwindled a little bit, but back in the day, at the beginning of the pandemic, it was extremely popular, featuring Ladino classes, cuisine classes, a yeshiva, meaning a rabbinical studies class, etc. That yeshiva was managed by Eliezer Papo, and you have all the meetings on YouTube available for free. You just type Eliezer Papo, and on his personal account, he has uploaded any and every meeting of the yeshiva, all of which were entirely in Ladino, sometimes for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. Eliezer can go on forever. So this is extremely useful and very engaging. So I highly suggest you check it out as well. And then we have the Encontros that had a wildly successful initiative that started also by turning a necessity into a virtue during the pandemic. It's called Encontros al Had because al Had means Sunday in Ladino. So it means that it takes place every Sunday. Encontro is a meeting, so it's Sunday meetings. Every Sunday it takes place between a balabai, who is a host, right, and a musafir, who is a guest, and they speak exclusively in Ladino for 1 hour, also taking questions from the audience. So that makes for a digital homeland. And finally, Netflix series, right? In the book, I discussed 2 of them, which are the 2 main ones I'm aware of. Kulüp, which means the club, which is set in 1950s Turkey around the age of the pogroms that led many to the Israel diaspora. So it's extremely interesting. The content has been curated by Izet Bana, who has served as the language coach for the show. Extremely knowledgeable. It features a lot of community speakers, meaning a lot of the people who speak Ladino on the show already spoke Ladino as their first language. And then we have the Beauty Queen of Jerusalem, or the Beauty Queen of Jerusalem, La Reina de la Hermosura de Jerusalem in Ladino, which is about Ladino in Israel, right? So it's a different. The language coach is Shmuel Rafael. It doesn't feature as many community speakers, and Ladino is not as vernacular in this TV series, which makes it more realistic, ironically enough. So it has pros and cons. Check it for yourself. My chapter contains every single word uttered in Ladino across the first season of both shows, Club and the Beauty Queen of Jerusalem. Every single word is annotated, translated, and discussed. And finally, the Web 3.0. This is the last chapter of the book, the one that has received the most controversy, the most backlash, to be perfectly honest with you. And I don't disagree with it. I think it's controversial. Nobody knows where the Web 3.0 is going. And it's mostly about the metaverse and the Sephardic network state. So two ideas that are very complex to explain, but let me explain the main idea. The metaverse is the idea that there can be a platform with all of these digital homelands we have discussed, Los Ladinadores, Ladino 21, Ladino Comunidad, etc., can coexist within the same environment, can go beyond meta, the fractal reality of diaspora. So with the same avatar and username, you can log in into the metaverse and access all of these platforms. That is the idea, right, of the metaverse. And then the Sephardic network state is the idea that we can create a mixed reality state that is no longer the legacy nation state, that is no longer Spain, Portugal, Israel, Turkey, etc., but it's a mixed reality between an online community and physical properties owned by that online community scattered across the globe. So there's no longer territorial continuity or contiguity, but all those territories are united through mixed reality. And that could lead to a form of reverse diaspora, right? To a form of bringing the Sephardic community back to physical spaces, even if those are not in the traditional form of the nation state. Those are the two initiatives discussed in the last chapter. And that's it from me. Merci mucho, Haverim. And now I'm very happy to take any and all the questions you have. Thank you.
Sorry, can you go? Hi, Carlos. Just wanted to apologize for the fact that my connection failed completely and I can't turn the camera on. Really, really sorry. But luckily you're co-host, so that saved the day. So that was an amazing presentation, an excellent example for many people to follow and reinvigorate so many endangered languages. I can think of a few linked to Romanian as well, such as Megleno, that also has even less speakers than Ladino. So yeah, indeed, let's open the floor to questions, and people can turn their videos on as well if they want. It's very
I
kind of.
apologize for the, thank you, Ramona. I apologize for the noise, the background noise. Somebody decided to start construction work now, but I'll try my best. Let me address Dolph's question first. Thank you, Dolph, for attending. And the question is, do you know of any Ladino communities on alternative social networks like Mastodon or Fediverse networks? The answer is no, I don't, which is not to say they don't exist. I don't think they exist, but just because I don't know about them doesn't mean they don't exist. I know that Mastodon is a much more decentralized network that has less issues with privacy and extractivist capitalism. So it's something that I'm very much in favor of, and I discuss in my book, Critical Polyglot Studies. So it would be desirable to have a digital homeland in Ladino on Mastodon. I'm not familiar with Fediverse. Would you mind explaining what Fediverse is to myself and the audience? Thank you.
The Fediverse is it's the network that connects various networks like Mastodon. Like if Mastodon is the version of Twitter, I can see others. I can interact with the posts of my friends on the Fediverse version of Instagram, for example. It's just a collective name for these networks.
Right. So it sounds like what I was saying about the metaverse, but applied to social media, right? Like an ensemble of social media. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Dolev. So yes, my answer is it would be desirable. I don't know that is the case currently, but I'm all for it. And on a related note, Moselle, thank you, Mosel, for attending, asks, can you explain a little bit about the metaverse idea? How will that work? Would los ladinadores aquí in Jerusalem, etc., be willing to partake? And that is the key question, Mosel, indeed. So part of my concern with the Web 2.0 is the so-called GAMAM. What is GAMAM? Is the big 5 companies of technology, right? It's Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and Meta. If you think about it, every platform I have presented on the Web 2.0 belongs to one of these, right? So if you're talking about los adinadores, it belongs to Facebook, which belongs to Meta. You're talking about the WhatsApp group, it belongs to Meta. You're talking about Gmail accounts, they belong to Google, etc., right? The Web 3.0 promises to decentralize this, promises to provincialize these 5 companies and promises a more free internet in that sense, right? The question is, will these individual initiatives and digital homelands that have already proved successful be willing to relinquish property ownership rights over these platforms? I don't know, you will have to ask them. My intuition is, with much chagrin and disappointment, probably they wouldn't, or it will be difficult, right? Probably they wouldn't, or it will be difficult. So if you ask me, for instance, right, Ladino 21 belongs to YouTube, right? And so, which belongs to Google, right? Would I be willing to relinquish this? Yes, we have already started conversations to donate that archive to national libraries, for instance, in Israel, which is the right thing to do, because if YouTube decides tomorrow that they no longer want to promote that content, they can just shut it down unilaterally. So I think the survival of Ladino is more important than our private interests and will benefit from that. But I cannot answer that question on behalf of other people, right? I don't know, but that would be definitely an obstacle. It wouldn't be easy. There's a lot of people that have told me in the community, hey, you know what we need? We need a single initiative that centralizes all other initiatives so far. I say, yes, great, but who manages that, right? Who centralizes that decentralization? That is the big question. That's why I think Dolev's initiatives on Mastodon or Fediverse make for a superior alternative. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. More questions? Demandicas? There are some names I don't recognize. I don't have the pleasure of having met these some of these names here. So it would be great if you could introduce yourselves, share your interest, perhaps, or pose any questions. I'll be all for that. Yeah, otherwise I can elaborate on some of the aspects I couldn't during the presentation.
So whilst people are thinking whether to turn the videos on, I'd like to know if you use the book in your teaching in the US at the moment, or online, or?
Yes, indeed. I am teaching, I have taught a master's course here at Cal State University, Fullerton, which is about minoritized languages of the global Hispanophone, including, I like difficult words. So this is minoritized languages of the global Hispanophone. And I include Ladino as a case study. I also include Chabacano and Palenquero, but Ladino is a case study that I have used, and I discuss the online revitalization of Ladino partly through this book. So I think this book is very useful for anybody who wants to discuss the online revitalization of endangered languages, and Ladino just offers a very interesting case study. And it's always easy to empathize with the students and trace connections, because somebody always has somebody or a relative or a friend they know that is related to Ladino, as minoritized as it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, and obviously through the internet you can easily reach these people.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes we invite speakers too, like L1 speakers of Ladino that can answer questions, and that has been very, very useful. I remember we invited Rachel Bornik, and somebody asked her to sing. Can you sing a song for me? And she said, no, I'm not a singer. Yeah. Perhaps an idea I wanted to touch upon, and please, if you have any questions, do post them or raise your hand to interrupt me with whatever question or comment you have. It's the idea of the Sephardic network state. This is a very futuristic. Well, I have a question, so let me forget about this and address the question. Inara says, hello, I'm an undergraduate at CES, reading history, politics, and economics. Okay, nice meeting you. I'm of Angolan and Portuguese background, yes, but I studied Spanish throughout high school. I have general linguistics interest in the languages I'm proficient, and I came across Ladino. I was curious to learn about the similarities with the modern day languages, specifically how much easier is for. Okay, thank you very much for your question. Now, I would say that in general, Spanish and Ladino are more mutually intelligible than German and Yiddish. Even more, right? As mutually intelligible as Yiddish and German are, Spanish and Ladino, particularly Ladino in the Latin script, are even more mutually intelligible. That said, with caveats, right? It depends on how much you accommodate. How many Turkish words do you want to use? How many Hebrew words, etc., right? But in general, the learning curve is significantly shorter if you already know Spanish. Portuguese, I wouldn't say helps as much. Yes, there are some words like devagar or morar, etc. But in general, the language you want to master as a shortcut to learning Ladino is Spanish rather than Portuguese, right? Now, a key difference with modern day languages, I mean, modern to me is just a password for colonial, right? So a key difference with colonial languages is that there's less normative pressure, meaning there is less agreement or prescription as to how a specific word should be written or pronounced. As a result, if you want to say hacer in like to do in Ladino, you can hacer or fazer. Both are correct. Hacer is the Istanbul dialect. Fazer is the Selanik dialect, and both are correct. So a difference that I see is that a lot of people come to my Ladino classes with the expectation that there's only one form of saying, one correct form of saying or writing words in that language. And I always tell them this is not a quote unquote modern language, right? This is an endangered language with less normative pressure, which means that there's much more variety and less rules as to how to go about certain words. Okay, just leaving the library. Okay, no worries. Joel has a question.
Yeah, I do. And I'll turn my camera on just because it's polite. Can I say two things now, actually, because that previous thing you just spoke about triggered a thought off.
Thank you.
Go
ahead.
Can I ask my question first, or can I make a little point onto this?
Make the point and then ask the question. Both, yeah.
So in regards to Inara message in the chat, purely anecdotal. I've showed loads of Ladino stuff to European Portuguese speakers, and all of them have told me that it sounds like, to them, it sounds like a Portuguese person who's trying to speak Spanish. And that's what it sounds like to them, all the people I've played it to. And they've also told me they can understand it pretty well if you have sort of some common sense and can pick up on context clues. You might not understand all the words or the vocab, but just through context you can sort of ascertain what's going on. But isn't that the nature of living, isn't it? You fill in the blanks where you can. Anyway, so my question was, and it's a bit long-winded, I have a real problem with this concept of like digital nation state or whatever. I don't understand it at all. I can't wrap my head around it.
May I add to this that you can check our interview, Joel and I, on YouTube. You just type Ladino on the internet, and Joel, you will find our discussion about this concept in perhaps more detail, but just go ahead.
I don't, because okay, so this is going, can I go off a slight tangent so I can make sense?
Go ahead.
So, like 5 years ago, I was part of because I have high functioning Asperger's. I know that's a controversial term to say in this day and age, but I'm old enough that that's my diagnosis. So yeah, and I was part of this autistic theatre group, and I was part of this play, and it was entirely done on virtual reality, and it was about, basically the whole premise was, you know, does virtual reality in the metaverse and create a space for people who cannot function, quote unquote, in society. And a lot of the people who have the higher access needs than me said that they really like the idea of just having a society on the internet, because they can articulate themselves better via social media rather than vocally. Some of them were non-verbal. Anyway, the whole premise of this play was you would take people around in virtual reality and but my concern with that, which it's my similar concern that I have with this whole digital nation state concept, is I feel like it's quite othering. Like, rather than the world adapting around vulnerable groups of people, whether it's, you know, like Sephardim, who are a minority group even within the Jewish community itself, I find I can't wrap my head around the concept. I find it kind of othering, because and the reason why I don't understand it is because this isn't being applied to other Jewish groups specifically, and I feel like it furthers the how do I say this diplomatically, in my eyes, and I think it's because I've got a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept, I think it perpetuates Ashken normativity.
All right, great. Can I answer that question, just in case some other people have questions too?
Yeah, I don't really know what the question was, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you made the point clearly, that you're not convinced by the virtual reality, and not only are you not convinced, but you see very clearly what the setbacks might be, amongst which othering and the furthering of Ashken normativity at the expense of Sephardic marginalization, right? Yes, but then that's an argument against the metaverse. There's not an argument against the Sephardic network state, because the Sephardic network state is premised on mixed reality, mixing virtual with physical presence, with physical territories, right? So yes, that's an argument for the metaverse, and I would agree. I think that the metaverse could potentially keep people, forget about Sephardim and Ashkenazim, just people at large atomized, instead of being emancipatory, instead of building community, which is what the whole idea of digital homeland is about. So I completely agree with that idea, and I will make it extensive to other people, but of course is even more damaging if it already affects a community that has been traditionally marginalized. So I get that point too. Yeah. So I think that's a very valid point concerning the metaverse. Yes. Do people have other questions, ideas, introductions, perhaps in response to the questions that have been posed? That as well. I don't know if Ilil is here still. Is Ilil here? Yes. Do you have any comments, Ilil?
Hi, Carlos. I'm here.
Thank you,
I didn't. Sorry. I don't have any question. I just wanted to really congratulate you on writing really innovative research, and this is new, And I'm saying it here. I didn't read the entire book, but I already downloaded it and I am going to read, but I'm definitely going to mention it for my students in the class we have the next semester. So this is very interesting and I wanted to congratulate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Iril. And yeah, if you want me to give a talk to your students as well, I'm available. You can reach anytime. Thank you.
Wow, that would be great. I'll talk to you about that. Bye-bye.
Of course, yeah. Thank you. All right. Any other questions I can help with?
So could I ask a question again?
Yes.
What's your next project, Carlos? What's the next thing you're gonna do?
There are things I can tell and things I cannot tell. So the things I can tell,
yeah, go for the ones that you can tell.
the things I can tell, I'm working on a Hacketia chapter, which should come this year.
Yeah.
It's about the colonial possibilities of Hacketia on the internet. I'm also releasing my Hacketia fieldwork in Tanger and Tetuan this very week and the upcoming weeks. And I'm also working on other areas of artificial intelligence, and that's the part I cannot fully tell. But
Okay.
people should have very good news in a couple of months for possibilities for people to practice Ladino on the internet for free. It has to do with that, yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm also working, and I'm working on a Ladino textbook, which is under contract with University College London Press, right? And yeah, just writing it. It has a global. It's about Ladino in the 21st century. So we're going to include inclusive language and go around the world. And each unit is devoted to a different country of the Sephardic diaspora. So I'm very excited about that, and I'm just working on it too.
So are we to read it. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I hope people have more questions.
See. Agnieszka has a question. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I have maybe a very simple question, but do you have in your book any statistics about the demographics of, members of the communities and in general Ladino learners in this like recent period? Is it like, are they getting younger or maybe, I don't know, people from I don't know, non-Jewish people from Spain are getting more interested or whatever, like about the recent dynamics of that.
Thank you, Agnieszka, for attending and for a question. I have statistics on number of users per platforms that I have concerning Los Ladinadores, concerning Ladino 21, how many subscribers, users are. Concerning the specific nature of the demographic of Ladino speakers, I have direct evidence in quotes, for instance, from Rachel Bornik, which I quote in the book, stating that at the beginning, Ladino Comunidad was only used by Sephardim, almost exclusively, almost 100%. But over the years, more and more people have entered Ladino Comunidad who are not Sephardic Jews, or are not even Jew, or are not from Spain, or are from different countries. So it seems that the internet is diversifying the people that learn Ladino. I know that Aldo Sebi on Los Ladinadores regularly posts countries where users have registered in Los Ladinadores, and every time he posts an update, there are more and more countries. So there are over 20 countries, mostly from the Sephardic diaspora, but not always. So there seems to be conclusive evidence that the internet has diversified the demographics of Ladino language learners. Has it diversified to a radically different extent? No, I still think that most people are either Sephardim or related to Ladino somehow, perhaps in the process of conversion, because they just discover from a MyHeritage test that they have Jewish ancestor. That happens a lot. It has been diversified, but the majority of Ladino speakers are still of Sephardic origin. Yeah. And when I say diversify, it means in terms of geographical, but also in terms of age. Yes, there are more and more young learners. Does that mean that there is a strong intergenerational transmission? No, there isn't. Most people are dying without teaching the language to their kids. Even the ones that are most aggressively being activists on the internet, say for instance, Rachel Amado-Borny has devoted 20 years of her life to just every day, just disseminate Ladino, but she wouldn't teach Ladino to her own children, right? So that's even people who speak Ladino and are activists of Ladino do not necessarily pass it on to the next generation. So that is
And-
still an area of a lot of concern in Ladino. Yeah, much more so than in Yiddish and other languages. We still have a problem of intergenerational transmission, regardless of how many people are on Facebook, on Instagram. Still, Facebook is by far the 2.0 platform that is most used by Ladino speakers. And that's not where the young people are, is it? It's not Instagram, it's not Snapchat. People are not using Ladino there, barely. So there's still a lack of intergenerational transmission. Yes, we are destigmatizing the language, showing it belongs to the 21st century, but only a small percentage of young people are actually paying attention. That's my conclusion.
So maybe a follow-up question. So from what you're saying, I understand that, for example, there are no initiatives to group young parents both speaking Ladino and trying to bring up their children in Ladino and like support themselves mutually in wider groups, or maybe are there?
There are isolated initiatives. So, for instance, Sara Oeste, shout out to Sara, very helpful and generous. Sara Oeste has books and songs, lullabies, to teach kids Ladino materials. I know that Devin Nair, professor, chair of Sephardic Studies, University of Washington, Seattle, has taught Ladino to his kids and has produced some private materials to that effect. I know that Aaron has led the Shabbaton High School Initiative, where materials are shown in Ladino to high schoolers. So there are initiatives here and there, but there's not a master apprentice generational scheme such as there is in the case of Yiddish, as I also point out in the book. So there are no systematic efforts, but there are isolated efforts. I know Albert Israel was also touring schools in Israel, teaching Ladino through theater, but eventually they ran out of money or energy, or for whatever reason the program stopped. So there are initiatives, and they haven't been systematized.
Thank you.
So, Carlos, what do you think are the main reasons for which this intergenerational transmission is not more successful, let's say?
I think that the similarity is a double-edged sword, right? So just as much as I said that the mutual intelligibility between Spanish and Ladino furthered the ability of Spanish speakers to learn Ladino, and that's potentially 500 million speakers, it also stigmatizes people for the same reason. So if kids, for instance, learn Ladino at home and then they go to Spanish-speaking school, all the kids may or have made fun of them because of that. It's your Spanish sounds funny, right? That kind of thing. So that makes it very difficult to destigmatize Ladino. And so there's still stigma. Yes, there has been a positive ideological transvaluation thanks to the internet. People no longer see Ladino as something medieval or from the Middle Ages, despite the occasional BBC article about that. But it is one thing to see it on the internet or Netflix. It's another thing to take personal accountability and responsibility for it, right? So, for instance, in the chapter on the Netflix series, I polled spectators that had watched the first series of Kulub and Aki Yerushalayim, over 100 people, and asked them 3 questions. How much awareness has this brought about Ladino? Meaning you were not aware of the existence of Ladino and now you know it existed. How much more likely do you think it has made for you to want to learn Ladino? And how much more likely has it made for you to want to teach Ladino to other people, right?
Mhm.
And each of the question was like a funnel. The first question, raising awareness, had a lot of positive responses. So 90%, 100% of the people had said, yes, it has raised my awareness. How many people were then motivated to learn the language? Very few, maybe 10%. Said that they were motivated. The actual percentage might be less.
Mhm.
And then out of those who wanted to learn, how many of them wanted to teach? Maybe 10% of those who wanted to learn, right? 10% of the 10%. So those are the real numbers. We're seeing a lot of content on the internet, which is about consumerism,
Mhm.
which is passive by definition. You consume, right? Activism has to do with the opposite, with taking initiative, being active. So the internet has fostered a culture of awareness, yes, but it's a spectacle. It's a
Mhm.
consumerist spectacle rather than activist fuel.
Mm.
And in that sense, I think, for instance, the Oxford School of Rare Jewish Languages is a much more effective way of activism than YouTube channels or Netflix series. So we
Yeah.
need more people to learn Ladino, and out of those, we will find a percentage that wants to teach Ladino. Yeah. For instance, we're trying it with Solitreo. With Solitreo, we have been successful on the Oxford Rare School of Jewish Languages. Those who have learned Solitreo for some reason have become very motivated to teach it to other people and have gone on to initiate YouTube channels and private classes to teach Solitreo to other people, which in turn can unlock a lot of memories from the Holocaust and strengthen family bonds as regards Ladino.
Mm.
Mhm.
So, what would you ideally like to see done, in terms of helping the status of Ladino in an ideal world, let's say?
Yeah, I think there needs to be more talk about Ladino in Ladino. That's what I
Mhm.
think needs to happen at the university level.
Mhm.
So here I did my part displaying some slides in Ladino. I translated some terms, etc. Right? I tried to pick people's interest, give them
Mhm.
references where they can check Ladino only content. That needs to be done more because otherwise we just risk museifying Ladino as a folklore vestige,
Mhm.
right? So I think that also requires more initiative from the Spanish departments and Jewish studies departments. Yeah, UCL is the only Jewish studies department in the UK, right?
Mm.
And even then, Ladino is not permanent, right? Ladino comes and goes. We had
Yeah.
Jelko Jovanovic for a lot of years. Then we have me for a couple of years, and
Yeah.
that's it. But it's still an individual, personal effort. If we have somebody and we can afford a postdoc, then okay. Otherwise, we don't need it really.
Yeah.
We can proceed with just Yiddish and Hebrew and Aramaic, etc. Which I get they are more important in numbers and reach. But if Jewish studies department don't care about Ladino enough, or Spanish studies department don't care about Ladino enough, then
Yeah.
that battle is lost. It's as simple as that. And
Mm.
so here in the US, there's more money, which means that there's more room for those kinds of initiatives. Sometimes it's not the lack of will, sometimes it's the lack of funding, right?
Mhm.
And so we have initiatives at UCLA, for instance, at Sephardic, the University of Washington, Seattle, the chair of Sephardic Studies, etc. But even then, for instance, at UCL Ladino, most talks are about Ladino in English.
Mhm.
I think the second person who did a talk after Brian Kitchen, the second person who did a talk about Ladino in Ladino at UCL Ladino.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things. And those kinds of things are inspiring. For instance, when Brian did it, I was in the audience and that inspired me to say, hey, maybe next year I want to take my Ladino to a level where I can do a full presentation in Ladino, right?
Mhm.
And in turn, the talk I gave might have inspired somewhere else to do something similar. Julia Peck told me, hey, I listened to your talk and I was like, okay, maybe I can do my own project also about Ladino in Ladino.
Yeah.
And one can inspire other people. So that's how it works. So we need
Mm.
more content in Ladino, not just
Mhm.
about Ladino. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned this BBC article. I don't know if you already covered the topic whilst I had technical difficulties, or you want to say a few words now. It sounds like it created some
Yeah.
damage.
It was a popularizing article, but those can either raise awareness or raise awareness in the bad sense, right? As in
Mhm.
disseminating prejudices and
Mhm.
therefore reproducing the stigma rather than fixing it. And so the title was something about the Bosnians that speak medieval Spanish. Now, it's a clearly Orientalist title, right? So
Yeah.
this just exoticizes Ladino. This is not medieval Spanish, etc.
Yeah.
So it just reifies preconceptions rather than than fixing them. Now, I think there is a time and place for these type of collocations like medieval Spanish, etc. You can use them in a strategic sense, but it's a very risky thing to do. You can use them in the headline, for instance, and then do a whole article dismantling that, so that people, and then they will read that. Because if you say the Ibero-Romance languages on which Ladino is primarily based, no one will click, right? So you need something enticing to draw attention. We live in an attention economy, right? So I understand the strategic use of that. But then in the first line, you have already get to work and dismantle that. And the article doesn't do that. The article just unpacks the stereotype without challenging it. So
And
it's valid.
when was it published? Like, is it recent or?
Let me find
But just
it out
roughly, I
for
mean.
you. Yeah, it is
No.
recent. It is recent. Yeah. Let me find it out.
Yeah.
It should still be here. Yeah, 2018. And the headline is "The Bosnians Who Speak Medieval Spanish." That is the title.
And the author had anything to do with, it was just a general journalist, so to speak, or
No,
just,
it's actually a person who works for this and has produced, I think, a documentary about the language, but I don't want to name names. I'm
Okay.
just interested in the idea, in the
Yeah.
stereotype. I don't really care who wrote it, right? Thank you, Alison. Yeah. But this happens a lot in the Spanish press as well, in sometimes in El País and many places, or even in interviews that I give. Like I give a well-intended interview or conversation, and then I see the headline, and the headline is completely stereotypical, and I say, "No, please, can you change it? Please, can you put inverted commas around this term?" Like I didn't say that. I didn't talk about native speakers. You were talking about me talking about native speakers, but I didn't. So please don't publish that word. Yeah.
And whilst people maybe still think of questions, I'll just keep the conversation going. So, what was the most difficult part for you when creating this book or project? Because in fact, it's a project, right? And then you kind of
Yeah.
put it together.
Listen, I everything I had was positive things to make it as easy as possible for me. I had a huge financial support from UKRI, so I'm very appreciative for that. They gave me 2 years of block time for just research, where I could sit on my desk and write and research. So that is a very rare opportunity in today's world.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to create a book that I'm proud of. Yeah, so no, I didn't. I don't have a sad story to tell. All I had was help and more help and more help and more generosity. Now, in intellectual terms, the most challenging part of the book was probably the Yiddish connection, right? The fact that I'm not an expert in Yiddish, so I took Yiddish classes with Sima Berry. I'm very thankful for that opportunity. Lily Kahn was my supervisor. She's a world-leading expert in Yiddish. So maybe thanks to those, and particularly to Lily, that I could write something, just a little bit about Yiddish. So that was challenging. And the other challenge was probably chapter 6, because it's more speculative in nature. So when I was talking about metaverse and the Sephardic network state, some people told me don't include this chapter. I still took the risk. Some people didn't like it because of that, but hey, you have to do what you have to do. I think it was a right decision, even if it's to spark a conversation or to correct things, right? Yeah, I'm not saying that this book is the last word, but it's definitely the most systematic and critical account. And the last difficulty was probably that it's innovative in that critical account. So there's a lot of materials about descriptive materials. Yeah, here's Ladino comunidad. Yeah, but let's analyze it from the perspective of critical social linguistics. Let's talk about native speakerist ideas. Let's talk about language as ownership. That is nowhere to be seen in the literature. So in that sense, it's innovative, and it also goes against the grain of all the previous literature that treated the internet as an apostrophe or an appendix, right? So yeah, it can be downplayed as in, oh, you're just talking about the internet, it's not really relevant. No, it's talking about the primary arena where Ladino is spoken nowadays. So where it's actually not relevant nowadays, at least for revitalization purposes, it's the opposite. Is something that is territorial in intent and does not take into account the internet.
Well, also this kind of book will probably have to be revised at least every 2 years because, you know, things will happen on the internet in terms of, hopefully, in terms of more places opening up or some closing or disappearing or.
Yeah. I think in 10 years is a good estimate to do a second edition, maybe in 10 years.
Oh yeah, second edition, but I mean, yeah, a revised version now and again, yeah.
Yeah, with a couple new chapters, perhaps, right? In chapter
Yeah.
6, chapter 7.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Anyone else would like to? The motto that you had on the first page of the book, something around about making languages their homes, was that, did you create that or? That was a
Yes, I
beautiful.
brought that intentionally. A lot of people ask me, and then I'll address it in Nada's question. A lot of people ask me, why did you came into Ladino, given that it's not spoken in my family is not from Sephardic ancestry, etc. And the answer is that quote, right? It's a diasporic sense of identification stemming from Spain, and a sense that the language can be the home in a context where you're constantly being displaced or moved, be it for political, economic pressures, etc. So that meant a lot to me, that part. And then Inara says, as students, are there any ways that we can help with revitalization? Yes. The first thing you can help is by disseminating content that disseminates Ladino. So if you see a Ladino 21 video, or you see a Ladino Comunidad post, or you see a Ladino Los Ladinadores post about that. Invite people to partake, to share. Sharing is caring, right? That's the first thing you can do. Then over time, if you become proficient enough, then you can start producing your own content, right? So those are the two main things. And yeah, so this sharing what already exists, learning the language, and then passing it forward, be it by sharing content or by teaching that language. Those are the 3 steps: sharing, learning, teaching. Yeah, thank you. And thank you also to Prolang, because the talk that I gave 2 years ago when I was still writing the book
Yeah.
was a preliminary sketch, right, of the book. So one could argue that today's talk was similar, which it was, but at the same time was also very different and came with new insights from all those 2 years, right?
No, absolutely. No.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're always welcome. You have very
Thank you.
interesting topics. So
Yeah. Thanks. And also expanding, you asked me about what are you working on for the future. I'm not just working on Ladino, but Ladino is connected to the global Hispanophone in general, right? Marginalized languages that are related to Spanish across the globe. So Ladino is one example, but Chabacano is another one in the Philippines. Palenquero is a racialized one in Colombia, and there are many other examples. So I maybe next time I talk in Prolang is about another language.
that would be great. Very much looking forward to that.
Yes. Great.
Wonderful.
So is that, I think, all, unless anybody wants to ask a last minute question? Sí, sí, buenas noches, nochada buena, Elil, así mucho.
So talking about disseminating, so because we recorded the events, people are welcome to spread it, you know, because it will be on your pages, of course, Carlos, but also on the CIS YouTube channel. Inara is asking something.
Let me see. Let me see. Cool. We have a link to the slides. Complicated. The slides are not uploaded, but they're all in the video, so
Yeah,
you can always take a screenshot of those. Yeah.
yeah,
So I change them all the time too. So yeah,
yeah.
those are kind of private. No worries. Okay.
So we'll round up at 7:30. It's like 3 minutes left in case people really are thinking of something to add.
And yes, some people say that they know speakers of Haketia, Ladino, etc. So please refer them to me because those opportunities don't come easily. Every interview is hard, it's difficult. For instance, the interview that we just released last week with the speaker of Haketia in Paris was extremely difficult. I arrived to Paris, realized I didn't have my camera with me. I went out, it was raining, umbrellas broken. I found a store after 1 minute, after 1 hour walking and asking in different stores. I found a store where they had a camera, pay for it out of pocket. They said, no, we don't have it here, but you can pick it up tomorrow in downtown in a place
Oh,
that is close to your conference. I said, okay, I'll take that. I went the next day to the conference. I left the conference, went for the camera, picked it up, talked to the director of the center. Do you have a room where we can shoot an interview? Ask the interviewee, can you do an interview in Haketia, please, as we spoke in the email? Yes, well, maybe, I don't know. Are you tomorrow in town? No, tomorrow I'm not in town. Well, maybe then later, I don't know. I'm tired now. We'll see later. Ask later. Yeah, okay, we can do it now. Yeah, okay, but only 20 minutes. And finally we did it. Then took the recordings, isolated from the phone, from the camera, etc. And finally put them together, send them to the editor. So for just 5 minutes on YouTube, right? So that's all the work that's behind. So
yeah, that's what I meant, you know, when I asked you like what's difficult. Yeah, because I thought kind of finding the
oh
subject,
yes.
finding the time, synchronizing, all that. Yeah, but
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah, all those difficulties are there and it's also without money, right? All of this is paid out of pocket. So yeah. The
what's paid
the
out the pocket? Sorry. I,
the trip to Paris and
oh yeah, of course. Sorry, I
the
missed that.
camera and all that. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That was hard, yeah.
yeah.
But then once it's put together, it's there forever. So it's worth it.
Yeah, maybe you should add a couple of anecdotes to the next revised
Yes, yes.
version because you know this kind of oral history is always very interesting and it shows
Uh-huh.
you know how dedicated you are.
Yes, I have a lot of stories there.
Yeah. What do you think about the idea of maybe having stand-up comedy in Ladino? Is it too
I
wacky of
could. I
an
think
idea?
Albert Israel does theater sketches in Ladino. And he's really good at that in Israel. I could do that. Yeah, I could see myself doing that in the future. I would like that genre.
Do it.
All right, I need to go now,
Yes.
unfortunately. So
Thank you so
that's
much,
all right.
Carlos. Thank you, everyone. It's been amazing to have you here again, and you're a great speaker. So, yeah, I hope I'll see you soon, and various other people in UCL that were here online. Thank you so much.